When we talk about objective moral truths, we're asking a fundamental question about the nature of right and wrong. Are some actions right or wrong in themselves, regardless of what any individual person or culture happens to believe? Think about a simple statement of fact like, the Earth revolves around the sun. This is true whether you believe it or not. Its truth is independent of our opinions. The idea of objective moral truth suggests that moral statements can be similar. For example, the claim that inflicting suffering on innocent children for fun is morally wrong might be a truth that holds steady, a fixed point in our moral universe, not just a matter of personal taste or cultural convention. It proposes that morality is something we discover, not something we invent. This idea stands in sharp contrast to the notion that morality is purely subjective, like a preference for a certain flavor of ice cream. If morality is subjective, then saying stealing is wrong is just another way of saying I don't like stealing. There would be no real basis for condemning the actions of others if their preferences simply differ from our own. The concept of objective moral truths, however, provides a foundation for making genuine moral judgments. It allows us to say that a person who believes genocide is acceptable is not just expressing a different opinion, but is actually mistaken. They have failed to grasp a fundamental truth about the value of human life and dignity. To make this clearer, let's consider a real-world scenario. When we universally condemn acts like the Holocaust or the Rwandan genocide, we are acting as if there is an objective standard. We don't just say, well, from their perspective, it was acceptable. Instead, we assert that what happened was fundamentally and unequivocally wrong, regardless of the perpetrator's beliefs or the societal norms that allowed it. This powerful shared condemnation points toward a belief, often unstated, that certain moral lines exist that no person or government has the right to cross. This is the core idea of objective morality. Some principles of right and wrong are binding on all of us at all times in all places. So the central question is this: is morality more like mathematics, where there are correct answers to be found, or is it more like fashion, where trends come and go and there is no single right way to dress? Are the principles of justice and compassion part of the fabric of reality itself, or are they merely human creations, useful but ultimately arbitrary? Exploring this question takes us to the very heart of what it means to live an ethical life and to build a just society. It forces us to examine the deepest assumptions we hold about our responsibilities to one another and the very meaning of good and evil. One of the most powerful arguments for the existence of objective moral truths comes from our shared moral intuitions and reactions. Across different cultures and throughout history, certain actions consistently provoke a deep sense of moral outrage. The act of torturing an innocent person for amusement, for instance, is almost universally seen as abhorrent. This widespread agreement suggests that we are not merely expressing personal feelings, but are instead responding to a real feature of the action itself, its inherent wrongness. This shared moral sense can be seen as evidence that we are all tapping into the same underlying moral reality, much like we all perceive the same physical world through our senses. The consistency of these core moral judgments is difficult to explain if morality is entirely relative. Another compelling argument is the idea of moral progress. Over centuries, many societies have moved to abolish slavery, extend rights to women, and recognize the injustice of racial discrimination. We tend to view these changes not just as changes, but as improvements. We believe that a society that rejects slavery is not just different from, but morally better than one that permits it. This very notion of progress implies a standard to measure against. If there were no objective moral truths, we couldn't say we are moving closer to a more just world. We could only say that our values have shifted. The concept of moral progress only makes sense if there is a goal or a benchmark of what a truly just society looks like. Furthermore, consider the nature of moral disagreement itself. When two people argue about a moral issue, such as the fairness of a particular economic policy, they behave as if there is a right answer to be found. They marshal evidence, make arguments, and try to persuade one another. This process is very different from arguing about which flavor of ice cream is best, where we quickly accept that it is a matter of taste. The very act of engaging in moral debate suggests that we believe there are better and worse answers, and that through reason and discussion, we can discover them. If morality were purely subjective, such debates would be pointless. There would be nothing to be right or wrong about. Finally, our strong emotional and rational responses to heroic and villainous acts point to an objective framework. When we hear about a whistleblower like Edward Snowden, who risked his freedom to expose what he believed to be government overreach, we debate whether his actions were right or wrong. We don't just say, "That's what he chose to do." We analyze his motives, the consequences of his actions, and the principles at stake. Similarly, our condemnation of historical villains is not merely a statement of dislike. It is a judgment that they violated fundamental moral duties. These deep-seated reactions and serious debates suggest that we are grappling with real moral properties, not just airing our personal preferences. Despite these powerful arguments, there are significant challenges to the idea of objective moral truths. The most common objection is the sheer diversity of moral beliefs across different cultures and historical periods. What one society considers a sacred duty, another might view as a barbaric practice. For example, practices like polygamy, arranged marriages, or certain dietary restrictions are accepted in some cultures but condemned in others. This cultural relativism leads many to conclude that there is no single universal moral code. If morality were objective, they ask, why wouldn't everyone agree on it? The vast landscape of differing human values seems to suggest that morality is a product of culture, not an independent reality. Another major challenge comes from the field of evolutionary biology. Some thinkers argue that our moral feelings are not insights into objective truths, but are instead evolutionary adaptations that helped our ancestors survive and reproduce. Feelings like empathy, altruism, and a sense of fairness could have developed because they promoted cooperation within a group, making that group more likely to thrive. From this perspective, our moral sense is a biological tool, not a window into transcendent principles. The guilt we feel when we lie or the anger we feel at injustice might just be evolutionary mechanisms, not signs of a violation of a cosmic moral law. This view grounds morality in our biology, not in objective reality. Philosophical dilemmas have also cast doubt on the concept of objective morality. One of the oldest is the Euthyphro dilemma, posed by Plato. It asks, is something right because God commands it, or does God command it because it is right? If it's right simply because God commands it, then morality seems arbitrary. God could have commanded cruelty, and that would have made it right. If God commands it because it is already right, then morality is independent of God, and we are still left with the question of where this objective rightness comes from. This dilemma highlights the difficulty of grounding objective morality, whether in a divine being or in some other source. It leaves us searching for a firm foundation that is hard to find. Finally, there is what some call the queerness argument, which points out that objective moral truths would be very strange entities, unlike anything else we know in the universe. We can scientifically test for physical properties like mass or charge, but how would we ever test for wrongness? There is no moral ammeter we can use to detect it. This lack of empirical evidence makes objective moral values seem mysterious and unverifiable. They don't fit neatly into a scientific worldview, which relies on observation and experimentation. For anti-realists, this lack of a clear way to know or prove moral truths is a strong reason to be skeptical of their existence altogether. The debate over objective moral truths has created a major divide in philosophy between two broad camps, moral realists and moral anti-realists. Moral realists are the philosophers who believe that objective moral truths do, in fact, exist. They maintain that moral statements like genocide is wrong are propositions that can be true or false, and that their truth is independent of human opinions or emotions. For a moral realist, morality is a real feature of the world that we can learn about. Thinkers like Plato, who believed in a transcendent form of the good, and Immanuel Kant, who argued for a universal moral law based on reason, are classic examples of moral realists who sought to place morality on a firm, objective footing. These realists believe that